actually on the 4th of April, but the whole week people still spend time going, visiting the grave of the ancestor or the parents or grandparents. And my family does that every year too, but we do not go there to offer incense or food or to visit them because we don't think they are there. To us, we believe that they're sleeping. That's the ashes of the body of my grandparents. But they don't have any consciousness or they do not recognize us, that they'll get angry with us if we don't go there. That is not the purpose that my parents brings us there to the grave. But one of the reasons that we go there every year is my dad who tells us stories to remind us about who we are. He tells us stories about how my grandfather came to Singapore and how his father before him lived and how his life were and what lessons we can learn from him. And so every year we have this tradition, and it's also a way of teaching the younger people to respect the elders, the older people. Filial piety is very important to the Chinese people, and that act of going to visit the grandparents' grave is to remind us that they still love them, and they loved them when they were alive. So that is built into the family. But I asked my dad, I said, Dad, where did this thing come from? Who started it? Did somebody one day decided that, how did it become an official day, a festival that the Chinese people celebrate? And this is the story he told me. By the way, it's interesting. In primary school, if you take Chinese class, all of us have to memorize one poem, and that's it, only one. But it has to do with Qingming Festival. I don't know why that is a particular one we have to memorize, but that's the one. And the story goes that it has to do with this guy. The guy, he lives in this time where it's called the spring and autumn warring period during the ancient China period. It's before the Three Kingdoms, before the establishment of the Chinese kingdom. It was a time where there was a lot of civil war, and you can see how China was divided into many, many, many warlords. And it's during that time, the spring and autumn time period of the Chinese people, there was a man named Jie Zitui, and he was the servant of a man named Chong'er. Chong'er, it sounds like double years. So he was the servant of this guy. He was a prince. Chong'er was a prince. But their country was being attacked by the neighboring country, and they had to run. And so they ran to a mountain, and on the mountain, they ran out of food and water. And so they were running out, and they were exhausted, they ran out of energy. So Chong'er sat down by the tree with his men, and they were just resting, and the rest of them says, we need to find food for our prince, because if our prince die, that is the end of our country. And so the servants and the followers of the Chong'er went around, Prince Chong'er went around to look for food and water, but they found water, but they couldn't find food. And so history goes that this servant, Jie Zitui, says, I cannot let my master die. And so what he did was he cut off flesh from his hip and cooked it in the water he found and gave it to his master to drink. And Chong'er didn't know. He ate. He's like, wow, you found animal, you hunted something, good job, drank it. It was not until later that he saw the wound on his legs that he says, what happened? And he confessed and said, I couldn't find food for you, prince, but I had to keep you alive, so I cut off my own flesh to feed you. So because of that, he became a beloved official of Prince Chong'er, and later on, Chong'er actually regained power, and he took over and he became the Duke Wen of Jin. He became an emperor, a warlord again, and he promoted and he rewarded every person that followed him, except that he forgot this man, Jie Zitui. And so many years went by, and people were saying, how could Prince Chong'er forget you? You should go to him and ask for your reward, because if not for you, he will be dead. But he refused. He says, my loyalty to my prince demands a reward. I am loyal to him, and that's all I need to do. And then later on his later years in his life, he was old, and he retired to the mountains. And that was when somebody told Prince Chong'er, he says, the Duke now, says, do you remember this man, Jie Zitui, who fed you when you were in the mountain? And he says, yes. And he realized that he's forgotten him all these years. And so he went in search of 芥子推. But in China, you can ask Uncle Fred Lam that the mountains there, you can't really just find a person because you want to find a person. You don't have a helicopter, you can't just Google map him. You couldn't find him. So he went and couldn't find him for the longest time. And so his other advisor says, Prince, are you really desperate to find this man? He says, yes, I am desperate to find him. He says, do this. He says, set fire to the mountain and force him out of the mountain. I don't know why he did it, but he did. And so he set fire to the forest and around the mountain, and he burned, and he still couldn't find 芥子推. Until later on his way back down the mountain, when he was trying to go back to his palace, he saw an old man sitting by a tree, dead. And he realized that was the man he was looking for. Instead of finding him, he ended up killing him. And so at that point he says, today will be a day of remembrance. Today will be a day that I will not forget what this man has done for me. And he decreed that from then on, that day will be a day where the whole country will mourn and remember a person who died, who lived and died for him and was forgotten. And he will never forget what he's done for him ever again. So that's the history. I know there are other repeated later on stories that reinforce the idea of the Qingming festival. That's why today we still celebrate it. But that was the beginning. But the thing is, so long ago, I don't know whether it's 100% true. But that's what I heard. And so this became the point that actually became later on the Three Kingdom period. And so the time of Qingming is a time of life and death. It's a time where my parents start to explain the concept of death to us. To explain to us that one day things will end. One day you will not live forever. And as a young child, you do not understand what that means. You think you're going to live forever, and that death doesn't come to you. And he says, but that's also, because of death, you must realize you must live. You must live now, live the way that God wants you to live. And he said there's three things in Qingming they must remember. And Qingming is about thanksgiving. It's about remembering what your ancestor did so that you can have the life you have. Remembering, be giving thanks. It's about living today, that you're alive, you're not dead. Be thankful for that and start living the way that you should live and live properly. And there's another saying in the Chinese proverb that if you want to plant a tree, do not pass Qingming. They say the best time to plant, the best time to sow is before Qingming, and anything after is going to be, your crop is not going to give you a bountiful harvest. And so my dad says it's also time to prepare, because this is a time in agricultural countries, they will plant by today, they need to plant everything. And so today he asks us to review your life. Are you preparing for the future? Are you sowing for tomorrow? So every year this is reminded, and they tell us about this, and there's a time of reflection, and we get to understand it more and more and more. And so this is the guy who became Duke Wen. See, there's another mountain that is in the Bible that has to do with life and death. There's another mountain that to a certain group of people till today memorialize a very important incident in their life, in their nation's country, and impacted people who spiritually inherited that identity. That is Mount Sinai. And one incident in the Bible that records this situation of life and death decided whether Israelites was going to continue becoming a nation or to cease to exist happened on Mount Sinai. And the only time in the Bible where three names of the patriarchs were mentioned is in this particular verse. When Abraham, where Isaac, and no longer Jacob, but Israel was mentioned together. Until we meet to the scripture reading today, Exodus 32. In Exodus chapter 32, it talks about life and death, and the fine line between that. That could have been the death of a nation, but they were given the opportunity to live. And the verse goes in Exodus 32, verse 9 to 10. Exodus chapter 32, verse 9 to 10. I have seen this people, the Lord said to Moses, and they are a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone so that my anger may burn against them, that I may destroy them. Then I will make you, Moses, into a great nation. So here God sees what Israel was doing while Moses was away. Moses was called by God to go into the mountains, and the Israelites were left under the care of Moses' brother Aaron. And after Moses was gone for quite a few days, the people start to worry, and they went to Aaron and says, "Where is this man that has gone? And I don't know where he's gone. Maybe he's dead. Where is this God that's supposed to lead us out of Egypt into the land of Canaan? Well, why don't you give us a God?" Saying to Aaron. Interesting thinking. If I can't see God, we make one for ourselves. And so they did. They made a golden calf as a representation of their God, and the Lord saw this. He saw this. And there comes this verse. And many people look at this verse and says, man, the Old Testament God is so vengeful. He sees them building a golden calf and he wants to destroy them. But if you read the verse carefully, it says here, it says, "They are stiff-necked people," verse 10, "Now leave me alone so that my anger may burn against them." May. We skip on the little words very often. Is God burning with anger right at that moment? He wasn't. He says, let's talk. If it doesn't make sense, then I will burn against them. I will get angry. And then I will destroy them. But let's talk. God hasn't gone into this crazy rage, people destroying mindset yet. But because people do not read the Bible carefully, they say that's who God is. That's why the New Testament God cannot be the Old Testament God. They're different. The New Testament God is love, is Jesus, He died for us. Old Testament God just wants to destroy and kill people. But God's the same. There's a reason there. He said, may. And you will find out later why was that this discussion. And we go on to the next two verses. In verse 11 it says, "But Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. Lord," he said, "why should your anger burn against your people?" Hasn't burned yet. He said, why should you burn? Why should you get upset? "Whom you brought out of Egypt with a great power and a mighty hand. Why should the Egyptians say it is with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people." And it goes on. Verse 13, "Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore by your own self, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give your descendants all this land I promised them, and it will be their inheritance forever." Why did God get into this discussion that forced Moses to remember three people? Abraham, Isaac, Israel, who is Jacob. Why did he? We see here it says like Moses reminded God. Really? God forgets? It's really scary. See, we put our human thinking and we impose it upon God. We look at ourselves and we look at ourselves when we get angry. Then we forget all logic or common sense or love and we just blast. And we think God's like that. But God is not like that. God doesn't forget who He is, what He is, and what He can do in a moment of anger. If not, this world will be destroyed 2,000 times over. Because in a word, He can destroy the world. But God doesn't forget. Does He need Moses to remind Him? He says, God, remember? Remember Abraham, remember Isaac, remember Israel. So what was going on? Why did Moses have to remind God in a way? And the answer comes quickly. Because if you carry on reading the story, Moses goes down the mountain. See, he was okay when God says, I saw my people sleep. Moses actually didn't understand why God was going to get upset. And he was like, it's okay, God, forgive them, don't destroy them. He doesn't really understand who God is maybe at that point in time. Remember, it's the beginning of the journey. And when Moses himself gets down, he was the one that got angry and broke the 10 Commandments. Remember that story? You watching the movie, he goes, Why are they so noisy? They're partying, they're dancing, and he got upset. Just like God. And when God didn't get upset, God may. But Moses got upset. Aaron had to stop him. God knew Moses needed the preparation before he go down and lead his people. Moses was chosen to lead the Israelites to Canaan. And at that moment, he cannot lose himself. And do you realize that it was Moses later on that passed judgment on Israel? That the Levites would go through Israel and kill all those who would not repent. It was Moses. It's not God. God was holding back this prince of Egypt, who could get really upset, get really violent. God reminded Moses, remember Abraham, remember Isaac, remember Israel. You know, sometimes God uses our own mouth to convince us. It's very powerful, because it's very hard to argue with yourself. I can argue with people like today. I like to win arguments and I can argue. That's my brother. But if I argue with myself, I can't. Many times when I have an issue with God, I write a journal, my daily devotion. And I go back and I read my own journal. And I read what James says to James today. And I can't argue with myself because I wrote that and I understand what I was thinking back then. God had to prepare Moses for the Moses later on. And he says, remember Abraham. Remember Isaac. Remember Israel. Because the fact is, God didn't forget. Israelite has forgotten. Moses has forgotten. Remember Moses was brought up in the Egyptian family and he had to go away 40 years into the wilderness. He was disconnected. The Israelites were slaves for 400 years. They were disconnected. They had forgotten who God is. And they thought God forgotten them. So God had to remind them the promise he gave to them, to the Israelites through Abraham, Isaac, Israel. And what was the promise? There's three people. And the Bible does not waste words. The Bible is very intentional. And these three people represents three very different things. Because it's the reason why they're the only time they are referred to together. The only time in the scripture. Every other time, one person is missing. But this life and death defining moment for the Israelites, God had to include all three. Abraham. Continuously, if you read, whenever Abraham's mentioned, it's told in the context of thanksgiving. It's told in the context that God, although challenged Abraham to leave his people, leave the land of Ur, go out, I will form you into a nation. But God continuously, if you read the story of Abraham, provided, protected, even when Abraham fell, when he lied. God helped him, forgave him, changed him. He was no longer Abraham, but now Abraham. So God says, first of all, remember that I brought you out and I will provide. As I have brought Abraham out of his people, and I have provided for him. First thing, that Moses, I'm reminding you, so that you need to remind the Israelites. Second thing, Isaac, living. Isaac's story is about his life. The very beginning of the story, we see the living the life, looking for a wife, that he found a wife. It's about living in today and how your life is supposed to be. That you do not dwell in the past. But after remembering where God has led you, now you start living your life. That's how I intend for you to live, and don't just stay put. If you look at the story of Isaac, it's about him, Abraham bring Isaac to the altar and going to sacrifice Isaac, but God provided, and Isaac lived. It's not dead, he lived. So God provides, and God provides again, so that Isaac could live. Isaac's story is about life and death, and life winning over death. Isaac won. Isaac came down from the altar, living. Israel. Israel's a story of, I talked about it. Israel's name was Jacob. And I told you Jacob is very close to me. And I study the passage of Jacob a lot because Jacob is James. It's the Hebrew for James, Yaakov. And I studied because I don't understand my name. There was a first person patriarch that I studied. And his story is, I imagine your name at birth was, you a liar. You're a deceiver. But that was what people imposed upon that. But do you know the actual meaning of Yaakov? It's a follower. It's a disciple. That he holds the heel of the one before him. That is the definition in the scripture about a disciple of Jesus. That they walk so close that they're as though they're connected to God. That was who he was supposed to be. The follower. His life is supposed to be lived in a way that is a follower of Jesus. But he chose to depend on himself, not on who he's supposed to follow. And so he became the deceiver, relying on his own strength, tricking his way through life. But he repented. And he was changed, and God gave him a new name because now he is known as Israel, Prince of God, Victor. And so God told Moses, remember this man who was a deceiver, he changed. He lived his life wrong. But now he's a new man. There's a new future for him. It's time to sow, it's time to grow. It's time where you live. So God, in invoking these three names, He's saying, remember the past, how I've led. Remember that you're supposed to live right now. And if you have lived your life wrongly, remember there's a future that you can live correctly with me. He was teaching Moses so that Moses could teach Israel for the next 40 years. That Abraham, Isaac, Israel symbolizes how a person should live. All of us are on Mount Sinai Day. We can choose to live or die. But if you choose to live, and I hope you do you remember Abraham in your life? Do you remember Isaac in your life? Do you remember Israel in your life? Which area of your life are you lacking? Are you neglecting how God has brought you and blessed you and led you in the past? Maybe you don't spend enough time thinking back about who God had been to you and what God has given and has blessed you. Or maybe you are lacking in Isaac. You dwell in the past or you look just into the future, but you do not live your life now. That the life God has blessed you with this moment, this breath, this morning, is for you to live today. Maybe you're not living. Not realizing that your life is a gift that God has given to you, that you're supposed to die, but you're not. And you're alive, and this life living was precious. It's a gift. Maybe you lack Israel. You look at the future, and the future looks gloom, dark, full of defeat. But maybe the future holds victory. And you can overcome. And the future that is before you is a life that you can no longer be stuck in your current way of living. This life you live right now doesn't have to hold you down, doesn't have to bound you. You have a future that you can live as a free person. What do you need? Do you need Abraham? Do you need Isaac? Do you need Israel? Spend today, Sabbath day, thinking, reflecting, as God had reminded Moses on Mount Sinai. Abraham, Isaac, Israel.
Please stand for the closing